I think incredibly important. I think what dawned for me was the fact that 80% of everything in a coaching conversation is really emancipating from a way of being of the client, the who of the client, and trying to go deeper to understand what context are they operating out of, what kind of limitations they may or may not be imposing on themselves. Um, so really accessing those spaces and understanding the concepts around whether it's rackets, without getting too technical here, I think it's just understanding what's their way of being, what context is at play, and having access to that really shifts a lot in terms of, or rather, coaching essentially is a process of discovery and awareness. It's really helping them access those pieces and self-discover those pieces. So I found that incredibly useful. I, in fact, use that quite regularly in a lot of my sessions, and it's always left the client with a more expanded view, because essentially coaching is about expansion. You're just expanding the view. So very useful. I really found all those concepts very, very useful.
I remember having shared this when we had to do our presentations also, Draymond. It's only after starting and coming to, starting this journey or ontology and coming almost towards the end of it now, did I realize that being a coach is actually everything. It starts with knowing oneself. So for me, although I was practicing coaching earlier, but for me, it started truly when I inquired into myself. So the journey into myself is actually, I think, the most important thing when I want to hold space in the right way for the other person. If I earlier I had unresolved issues, repressed emotions, patterns, behavior patterns that I wasn't aware of, and a certain way of showing up in certain situations which was repetitive, which was not working well for me, and it sort of put a blocker to the way I was showing up in conversations where clients came with similar experiences. Uh, but undergoing this 9 months journey with you has helped me resolve um, most of those to a large extent. So I think the core of becoming a coach is the core of becoming self-aware. So that's what ontology and the 9 months journey with you has enabled for me. So it's like layers for me, like concentric circles. So at the core is self-awareness, then is being of a coach, and the third concentric circle for me is doing of a coach. So this is what has become, it's unlocked for me.
Yeah.
And then the next step would be, as I had, I think, shared earlier also, is when all of these three collapse without you even knowing, and when you seamlessly, effortlessly, you're dancing in the moment with the client, and you're operating out of intuition and tapping on it. I think ontology is a base. I don't know if I have the permission to say that, but I think it's the core of becoming a coach. Honestly, that's what I feel strongly.
See, it's basically, I think the ontological conversations has helped me to understand myself better. And that's I think the first space. How I listen to people, how I mean, even allow people to come up in my conversations. And that's so important, because in my allowing is where they should really show up. The second thing is to understand them from their perspective, as to a lot of things are unsaid in the conversation. It's not that the client opens up 100%. They don't. And they will only open up when they feel it's safe, comfortable to open up. So to provide that space also is so critical. And these conversations, in terms of understanding, even in terms of not speaking, just being there, holding that space, I think that's what ontology has opened me to. Also to understand that ultimately all human beings are more or less the same. I mean, the fears are there, the sadness is there, the happiness is there. So at some levels we are all human beings, but at some levels we are different. So each one of us is unique in a different way. So what ontological way of coaching has helped me to understand is the uniqueness of the person, to find out the uniqueness of this person. What is stopping this person from moving into where he or she wants to move? And that's the crux of coaching. So the coaching is all about understanding that person and helping, not in the say that we are giving an advice, but in making him move towards where he wants to move. And that comes through reflections, that comes through sharing, that comes through understanding them, acknowledging, and all that is part of the journey.
Very relevant, because if you don't know where your own mind is taking you and why, where why you're going in this direction, then how can you bring yourself back? How can you hold yourself as an authentic, um, hold a space that is unconditional, that's without reservation, that's without blockages of your own thoughts and habits and your own beliefs? How can you empty the space for connection to take place? So it is critical to the being of the coach, which is really all about coaching. I mean, we have a number of other tools and frameworks around it, but critically, it's about the being of the coach, and being able to utilize your words in order to now engineer a system for reflection and introspection and growth. So it's fundamental, I would say. And I suppose without using the word, coaching programs would have been employing it to some extent, but using the word gives it power.
I think ontology is relevant, and even if you're not talking about it, it's happening. So it's like, it's so relevant, I think, to talk about the topic of ontology when you're talking about coaching. So it is very relevant. I think it's relevant as a coach, to getting a deeper understanding yourself, and it's also relevant developing techniques and tools and working with a client. So I thought it had so much relevancy in many ways, because it can be something that it improves just you in your practice, and it can improve or help or support a client in their journey. So it has so many connections, I think, that make sense. And it's not something that people talk about a lot. So it was, as much as I thought before I took the course, I read about it and thought, oh, I get what this is. It isn't something to get, again, intellectually. It was something to get as a practice. And it really felt extremely relevant to me, and still does, and would love to continue the practice.
At no point do I remember having to memorize the core competencies. And because I never really memorized them, and because, we really explored the space that was, that was required to be embodied by each competency, because you started understanding, it became so internalized that you lived them, and it became very natural in the coaching conversations. So quite inevitably, really getting the coaching mindset has been my biggest learning arc, growth arc in this course. I'm sure a lot of work has gone behind, bringing this course to all of us. It seems very effortless, but I'm sure a lot of work has gone behind the scenes to design each session, so that each participant learner really gets the meaning of each competency, and that gets evidenced in the peer sessions or in the coaching sessions that we do after that. And you see that, you can see the difference, because in a lot of peer sessions, I saw the transactional manner in which the competencies were getting addressed by coaches. And for me, I was not even trying to think of the competencies when I was having the coaching session. It was all very natural, and we were hitting quite a number of them. So I think the ontological approach was quite magically but it was the shortest route to really getting the coaching mindset, I think, than any other way of doing it.
Yes, totally. I think like as the nature of being, like, until and unless we can learn to look at ourselves as, as a kind of a system, and maybe until then we wouldn't be able to see like what the client is actually going through. And this is definitely a very good tool in hand, like, once you explore yourselves, do this deep work with yourselves, and like you see, like at some point you the client is kind of a mirror, like, reflecting all the work you have been doing or he is doing. So it's very easy to hold that space and like hold that space in regard totally.